Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Hewitt. I run UK and Ireland for Visual Solutions. I'm supported today by Jose Manuel Munez, who will be doing a demonstration of the tool as part of this webinar. So just before we start the actual webinar, a couple of housekeeping issues. First of all, if during the webinar you have any questions, we'll be keeping your microphones on mute during the session. If you've got any questions, there is a chat window, and please feel free to raise questions at any time during the webinar. So if there's things that come into your mind and you want to raise a question about it, then please feel free to raise it through the chat window. And at the end of the webinar, we will do our very best to answer any or all of the questions that you may raise or that you may have as part of the webinar presentation. So today's webinar is about why managing your project requirements with MS Word and Excel is hurting your team performance. So it's really exploring really some of the limitations, some of the constraints that may exist when trying to run your requirements management process as part of your project using Microsoft Word and Excel. So hopefully I've got control. If I can click the next, here we go, here it comes. Right, so what the agenda today is we're going to give you a very brief introduction to Visual Solutions. We'll talk about the importance of requirements management. And at the beginning, actually, I'll give you our view of what we mean by requirements management. We'll then talk about why Microsoft Word and Excel are not enough. And I'll give you some interesting discussions and case stories that I've come across quite recently, actually, regarding companies who have been using Word and Excel as a basis for their requirements management. And then we'll talk about then looking at a little closer about Visual and the benefits of actually centralizing your requirements information in a repository that everyone can access, but also importantly how we can actually round trip between Visual requirements and the integration that we have with Microsoft Word and Excel. And then we'll go into the demonstration. So talk about, sorry, my finger problem. Oop, there's a slight time lag. So talk about, so who are Visual Solutions? So Visual Solutions is very much a company focused and specialized in requirements engineering solutions. So we are the manufacturer of requirements, Visual requirements, the tool set. It's a tool set that sits on an open database, and the graphic there showing Oracle. Oracle is one of the database platforms that we base our software on. We also support hosting on SQL Server as well. The icons in the top right-hand corner of this screen show that we are also ISO SPICE certified, and that's predominantly because we do a lot of business in the automotive sector in Germany. So to participate in that sector, you have to, your technology has to be ISO SPICE certified. The other thing that we also support is we're also certified by a body called IREB, and IREB is the International Requirements Engineering Board, and that's, by the way, tool independent, and it supports training courses for certification of requirement engineers. And there are 3 levels of course that we support. One is the foundation level, which is a 3-day course, and we can get certification, internationally recognized certification for requirement engineering. There's another level beyond that which is called the advanced level, and the board are currently also working on a 3rd level, which is the expert level. So very much a focus, as you see here, on requirements management. And just to give you a quick glance of where we're based, we've relatively new headquarters now in San Francisco in California. I'm based here in London, and my colleague Jose is based actually in Madrid, where our corporate headquarters is and where the head of our development function resides. And we also have an office in Munich in Germany. So we have more than 100 enterprise customers now, and these are customers who are long-term and significant users of visual requirements. And you can see here that we cover now a number of sectors. Obviously, we have a large presence in the, as I mentioned earlier, the automotive and transport industries. With Alstom in particular, we also cover, they also use our technology in their energy businesses as well. So again, a good spread of customers across aerospace, defense, banking, finance, and then a number of other industries who are users of our technologies. So what I want to go through now is what do I mean by, or what do we mean by requirements management? And so let me give you a view here, that if you can see the chart I've got now, very often customers that we speak to deal with requirements management as what I term islands of autonomous information. And here's a typical graphic of requirements management environment, where requirements information is held in a number of forms. So it could be Microsoft Word, Excel, minutes of meetings, notes, emails even, and also statistical data on progress in various pie charts, etc. And when I say islands of information, so each one of these documents represents information which is relevant to the project but actually isn't connected together. And the issue here with having these islands of information is that if one piece of information changes in one of these documents, the reality in this environment is that no one actually knows about that change or how it may affect requirements, which may be held in one of those other documents or islands of information. And so I view this. This is my view of what I term chaos theory. So you've got information distributed in these bits in these various documents, but not actually connected together. And what we want to do is take that information and actually bring some order from that chaos, where we actually start to think about linking the information together, but importantly here and vitally, not at document level. So each of the boxes you now see on this graphic, they are documents, but the traceability is not performed at document level, it's performed at individual statement level inside these documents. So that's what I term the chaos at the top down to the order at the bottom. And what is important is we actually link these autonomous bits of information together to create this order, to create this view that if one statement in one document should change, we can very quickly look at the impact, what is touched by that one change, what could be impacted by changing that one requirement on various other requirements which are contained in other documents. So we talk about here the concept of lifecycle traceability, and from a lot of the experience that no doubt many of you have who are watching this presentation, you do have this idea of information held in various documents through a project lifecycle. So at the beginning we start with stakeholder requirements, and as you will well know, stakeholders come in many shapes and sizes and in many forms. Finance, obviously your customer is a stakeholder, and your marketing department is a stakeholder. So these requirements come in at the beginning of any new project. We then translate those stakeholder requirements, which are their perceived needs. They're either real needs, perceived or expressed needs, and we have to translate those into some sort of system requirements that says, yes, we understand that requirement, and this is how we're going to exercise and execute that requirement as part of our design solution. Then we move to the lower level of where we actually define what those system requirements look like in our design, and obviously on the far side of the the list here, we need to think about how we can measure and test those requirements. But this is very important as a link, and we now look here at how we start to link this information, these, if you like, these little cobwebs, these little lines that exist between statements. And it's this level of traceability that we need to start developing to actually be able to control our project information. Again, not at whole document level, but at individual statement level inside those documents. So traceability is the key to achieving quality and compliance with, in this case, stakeholder requirements, or it could be standards or regulations. And we can use that same traceability to even manage a risk register, so we can have explicit links down from any requirement in a document down to a centralized risk register. So why is Microsoft Excel and Word not enough? Well, some of the things, we'll come up with a couple of the issues that are faced, or you may be facing. And just as a little story, I was talking recently to and I'm not going to name names, but I was talking to a pharmaceutical business somewhere in Europe, a large pharmaceutical business, and I was being told about a project spreadsheet. Of course, this will not, I'm sure, be relevant to anyone attending this webinar today, but they were managing their requirements in a project spreadsheet, and this project spreadsheet had, you ready for this, 23,000 cells. 23,000 cells of information. And they said to me in our discussion that managing the requirements in this spreadsheet was becoming quite difficult, and they were using the spreadsheet not only to define the requirements in the left-hand column, but they were using the other columns and the rows to define traceability from those requirements through the rows on this spreadsheet. It was a single spreadsheet, 23,000 cells. So the issue we have here, though, is that it lacks any actual process. It lacks any, if you like, shape and form to our requirements management process. So Word and Excel don't support the concept of requirements process. So who can change what and when? At individual cell level, you can't actually control who changes what and when they changed it, and the rationale for why they changed it. So what can be related to what and how, it becomes very difficult to manage. So the next one is lack of real traceability. Well, of course, across the rows and the columns, you've got some type of traceability, but the traceability is just, in the best cases, a field of text letting you know that there's some sort of relationship between requirements. There is no way to follow these traces or indeed get metrics or reports on how many requirements have been satisfied by our project management process. And the other thing that becomes difficult to control, of course you can manage a version and you can manage change at the whole spreadsheet level or the whole document level, no issue with that. Where it becomes much more difficult is managing versioning and change management and control at individual cell level, or in a Word document, individual statement level. So it's possible to have several documents, but there was no way to have several versions of the requirements, the individual statements inside those documents, defining who changed what, why, and when the change was made. So going through now, so why these autonomous islands of information is really not enough to control your project information. So the answer is there is no multiple access or access rights. So you can't have, in reality, multiple people realistically contributing to requirements held in one spreadsheet. There are some techniques you can employ, but it's not really what I would term a controlled project environment. So, and this therefore doesn't really support this concept of stakeholder collaboration, and where you have this central view that people from different disciplines, different engineering disciplines, different project disciplines, can truly share and contribute to information at one instance in time. There is no concept, no real concept of traceability, beyond what you can achieve between rows and columns on a spreadsheet or between columns in a Word document. And this is the concept of really to support the impact of change. So one requirement change, what impact does it truly have on one or many requirements that may be distributed over one or many documents? Configuration management. There is no real concept of configuration management beyond what you can do at whole document level. Here, what we're trying to do is actually introduce configuration management at individual statement level. And this is the only way in a project environment that you can truly deal with version management and complexity introduced by that project. There's no real opportunity for sophisticated reporting. And if you can imagine trying to print out a spreadsheet with 23,000 cells, then you can appreciate very quickly that that becomes quite difficult to read and report back to the people that need to know the information. And this is to support compliance and generate metrics of how you're performing in your project, how many of the requirements have been satisfied at any instance in time or fulfilled, how many of your requirements actually link to a test or measurement to say how we're going to measure our success, how we're going to measure our compliance. And there's no concept here really of process, apart from how you share that spreadsheet or that Word information in a controlled environment. And if we can't control process or we can't define the process, how do we enable repeatable process success on future projects? And of course, finally, it's of course you can integrate to some extent, but real integration and sharing individual pieces of information with other tools and other parts of our project lifecycle become extremely difficult. And through integrations, we can effectively drive return on investment, but without being able to achieve that integration, obviously that is an opportunity you lose. So with visual requirements, we talk about three primary things. First of all, at the top is really the concept of introducing process, introducing a view of your requirements information and how the documents are linked together, multiple documents with defined links. And that's starting to drive this concept of process and repeatable process. And if you can repeat process, you can also introduce the concept of process improvement as you move from one project to another. And the other thing we promote here is collaboration, where you start to centralize this requirement information in one repository that everyone within your project team can share in real time. And that becomes very powerful for actually bringing disparate communities of engineering or project expertise together and allowing them access to the information they need to make informed project decisions. Okay, they have the information at their fingertips that if one requirement needs to change, then we can look in real time what is touched by that change. What is that requirement linked to across one or many documents? And if we change that requirement, what is the impact of that change? And that's where the concept of collaboration comes in. And we build one view of the truth, one version of the truth. Of course, with an Excel document or a Word document, the reality is you can actually have multiple versions of multiple instances of one document. So which version is the current version of the truth? That becomes really quite challenging to manage. If you achieve the top two, if you define your process and you can capture it in a tool, if you take that process and you build that into a collaborative environment that everyone can work with, then guess what? The result is you get improved product quality. You get improved customer satisfaction, or let me say improved stakeholder satisfaction. Because at any instance in time, you can look at any stakeholder requirement or collection of stakeholder requirements and look at the current status of how that requirement has been addressed or fulfilled as part of your project management process. And out of that, you will gain improved quality. And before I hand over to Jose now for the demonstration, this is a view of this concept of collaboration. So we can actually import information from Microsoft Word and from Microsoft Excel. And if you want to, you can even round trip. I'm not suggesting we would actually encourage the concept of round tripping between Microsoft Word and Excel and the visual database, because what we must never lose sight of is where the mastership of the data is held. And what is reality here is that the Word and Excel documents actually just become a view on the data at any instance in time. The reality is that the version management, the baselining of the data at individual statement level is actually achieved inside the database and is shared where everyone gets one view and one instance of the truth. And that is vitally important. Of course, you can still push information out to Word and Excel if you need to, if that's the form you want to share the information in. But the mastership of the data definitely resides in the database. You can, my preferred output option, by the way, out of the tool, actually is PDF, because at least with a PDF format output from the database, people recognize that it is information, it cannot be changed, it cannot be adjusted, but it does reflect in real time the value, the view of that database at that instance in time. So that's, and in the background there you can start to see some view of our process. Here we've got our stakeholder requirements, which are made up of user requirements, customer requirements, and so forth. And of course we've got the acceptance test over on the right-hand side. But with this, I will hand over to Jose, who will actually provide a view of how we can actually import information from Excel and Word into the database and how we can start to view that information inside the database. So with that, I will hand over to Jose.
Thank you very much, Paul. Good morning to everyone. As Paul was saying, what I am going to do starting now is just leave the presentation and just show you a short demonstration in the tool itself. Okay, because you can do anything in PowerPoint, but we will like to show you all those things that Paul has been sharing in the tool itself. So what I'm going to do right now is just open a visual requirement, in this case version 4.5, and I'm going to connect to one of my existing projects. As Paul was mentioning just a moment ago, all these projects that I am watching right now here are stored in a commercial database. It can be SQL Server, can be Oracle. I'm going to log into this tutorial project, and this is now the first point that is different with Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel. For logging in, I'm going to use an actual login, a user and a password. In this case, I'm going to use
Jose?
Yes?
Jose, can I just say something?
Yeah, please.
There is a little bit of a time lag on your interaction, I guess, because of the broadband there. So if you can make sure you leave a reasonable gap between each event you do so that people get to see what you're writing at the time. Does that make sense? There's a little bit of a time lag in the
okay, perfect.
presentation, that's all.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you very much, Paul. So, like I was saying, in this login, I'm going to state the user I'm going to use for connecting to the project itself, and also, and this is really important, the user group or the role, the profile that I'm going to use for connecting. Based on this role, I'm going to have access over certain elements, and this is something that we won't have in Word, in Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel. Basically, depending on the role, I will be able to create certain element, to modify other element, to create those traces, to whatever. Everything will be configured based on the role. So I'm going to use, in this case, a role which is the business analyst in order to modify, to create new requirement. of course, all these roles can be configured, can be managed by yourself. So as you can see right now, this is the tool, this is the project, and everything is blank because we haven't started importing requirement yet. Okay. Before doing that, I would like to share with you, I would like to show you the process that we are following in this project. If you remember, one of the things that Paul was saying is that we can support a real process with the tool. So in this case, as you can hopefully see right now in my screen, there is a diagram, what we call a block diagram. This is basically the representation. This is like a meta model of the process that we are following. In this case, as you can see there, we have got user requirements that can be classified, that can be divided into several subtypes. We have got customer requirement, marketing requirement, standard, business rules. So we can define, we can configure a hierarchy between my requirement. A customer requirement is going to be also a user requirement, and so on. So we have created that structure, and we have defined also that the customer requirements can be divided into Excel requirement and Word requirement. Basically, requirement coming from Excel and from Word. And I will be importing those requirements just in a moment. So basically, we have got all those subtypes of user requirements that are the high-level requirements, the stakeholder requirements that they are going to enter into the system. And then someone is going to analyze those requirements and create system requirements, which are going to be low-level requirement, more detailed requirement, more technical requirement, more design requirement that are going to solve the request in the user requirements. Okay, we will have the traceability between those two type of requirements into the tool itself. But the traceability is, as Paul was mentioning, is not going to be from document to document, but from single requirement to single requirement. We will be analyzing that afterwards. And finally, we also have got some system tests that are related with those system requirements. Okay, so this is basically the roadmap or the table of contents of the demonstration. So what I'm going to do right now is just show you how we can, into this project, we already have some requirement, but not anyone in this current view. So what I'm going to do is just import from an existing Microsoft Word or from an existing Microsoft Excel document all those requirements and put them into the tool itself. So before importing, allow me to show you this document I've got in here, this Excel document that contains several requirements. As we are about to see, once the document is open, here it is. As you can see in the document, we have got several requirements. Into each different row, we will have a different requirement, and we will have several columns. Each one is going to be a different field for the requirement, the code, the name, several attributes like the origin, the customer asking for the requirement, the priority, the description of the requirement, so on and so on. So what I'm going to do right now is just take all this information and import all that information into the project. Okay, so I'm going to select the document I'm going to import, and then I'm going to select an existing configuration, because we can perform the mapping between the Excel document and the database. We can say, okay, we are going to import each requirement, it's a different row, but this column is going to be mapped with the code field. This one is going to be mapped with the field name, and so on and so on. Okay, so I have already configured all that mapping in order to keep this presentation short enough. And now what I'm going to do is just using that configuration, that mapping, I'm going to import all the requirements into my database. Not overwriting what we already have, not at all, but comparing the elements that we are importing with the element that we already have into the project. And as you can see right now, all the elements that I am importing are new elements. Okay, if any of these elements were already into the tool, we will get a notification letting me know, okay, this element already exists, so you can analyze the changes on the element and decide if you want to import it or not. In this case, all the elements are new requirements, so I'm going to import all of them. into my project. So just basically take all the information and perform the import process. It's going to take some seconds. In this case, as it is only like 40 requirements, something like that, it's going to be pretty fast, pretty straightforward. So it has already finished on my computer, but I will wait a couple of seconds in order for the presentation to catch me. So now we can finish, and we can just go back to a visual requirement, and when we refresh into the tool, we can see that automatically all the elements that we were displaying into the Excel document are now located also in my database. So I have automatically imported all that information. Okay. We can also perform the same process for importing a Microsoft Word document. Okay. In this case, seems a bit more complicated because with the Excel document, it's pretty easy. Just perform the mapping between the different columns and the different fields. What are we going to do for importing a Word document like the one that I am showing right now? For importing the document, we are going to perform a mapping between the fields into the tool and the different styles that we have got into the document. So we can specify, okay, if the style is code or child rec code or whatever we have called the style, we are going to put that into the code. If the style is name, we are going to put that into the name. So we can also automatically perform that automatic import. Okay, so I'm going to do it right now. So you can see that automatically I'm going to also import all the information coming from Microsoft Word into the database. Once we have got all that information in there, we can start modifying those requirements. We can start working with those requirements. Okay. Once again, like when importing from Microsoft Excel, we will be comparing the information being imported with the information that we already have into the project. So if there is any match, if there is any repeated requirement, the tool will let us know, and we say, okay, this element is already into the tool, so you have now to decide if you want to update it or keep the older version, whatever. So just as I was saying, automatically we are going to import a Word document. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy, because I already have the configuration saved with the mapping between the different fields and the styles. And we can now go back to the tool and just show that we have got also a Word document view that is going to contain all the Word requirement that we have imported. Okay, so just as simple as that, we have got all the elements imported from the Word document and from the Excel document into our tool, and we can now start working with all of them. In fact, one of the things that is also different when working with Word and Excel is that now that the information is in the tool, I can arrange that information, I can present that information in the way that is going to better fit my needs. So for example, if I want to work in a more Microsoft Word-like view, like for example this one, you can see in the view that I am about to open that we have got all the user requirements here in the navigation tree. You can see that we have got all the user requirements classified by the different subtypes that I mentioned before: marketing requirement, business, standards, customer requirements. And in the customer requirement section, we have got the Excel requirement that we have imported just a moment ago, the Word requirement, and some previous requirement. Funny thing is that the Excel requirement that I have imported, for example, we can display them using this Microsoft Word view. So instead of working with a Excel-like view, we can work with a Word-like view, or whatever we need. Basically, we can arrange the information with the different columns, the different rows that we need to work with that. Okay, so from here, the user can easily modify whatever he needs. So for example, I can go to the marketing requirement and say, I need to change the logo for the company, the logo for the application that I am just creating. So I'm going to modify this requirement. As several users may be working with this piece of information, for modifying anything, we need to first check out the requirement. By checking the requirement out, I am blocking the requirement, so it's going to be available only for me. Other users may read the requirement, but they won't be able to modify the requirement. Once again, this is something that is not available in Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel. If you open a document, you will be locking the document, the whole document. In this case, the blocking is performed at element level. So I can just, now that the element is blocked by me, modify, for example, the name. This is change. Or I can just modify the description or whatever I need. As you can see, the description is an RTF description, so I can put here images, I can put here an Excel table, a Word, even a whole Word document, whatever I need. So I'm going to modify this, I'm going to put this in here, and just perform a couple of changes, the priority, whatever I need in order to change this requirement. Once I finish with the requirement, I can check the requirement in, and it will be available for other users to modify it. Okay. One of the interesting things that we can see here is that all the changes that I have performed into the requirement have been recorded. We have created a new version of the requirement with all those changes. So you can see here in this versions tab that all the versions that we have created for these specific elements are available from here. And I can come and check an older version, see the rationale for the change in this version, whatever we need. We can even select two different versions and compare those versions. And the tool is going to highlight the changes between the two of them. Even for the description itself, I can just analyze exactly what I have changed. So for example, you have changed these 3 and you have put here a number 5. Okay, and I can even add a rationale for the change or whatever I need. So once again, this is something that I won't be able to do when working in Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel. I can compare the whole document, but not the specific requirements. Okay. So another thing that we can do from here is just create a requirement. We have imported a lot of requirements from Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel, but we may like to create our own requirements. So for that, I'm going to just click on the Create New Element button, and this dialog will arise. From this dialog, I can specify which type of element I would like to create. In this case, as this is a business analyst user, I have defined in the project, when customizing, when tailoring the process, I have defined that the business analyst is able to create only 2 types of elements: customer requirements and marketing requirements. Okay, so I will be able to select one of those into this list. Okay, so I can just select customer requirement and create a new customer requirement. By selecting customer requirement, the tool is going to display this template for creating the requirement. In this template, we will be able to fulfill all the corresponding fields for this specific type of requirement. We can define different fields for each type of requirement. For example, we can create specific attributes for the customer requirements that the marketing requirements are not going to have, or things like that. So I can just create a new requirement in here with a new description or whatever I need. This is a new description or whatever we want. We can specify the different attributes, and just as simple as that, we will be creating a new requirement. Okay, in this case, I have created this customer requirement, and it's going to be contained in here. So I can now modify whatever I want, change the requirement, or just finish with it and check the requirement in. Let's just figure out that we have created a real requirement. This my default name requirement. I'm going to just modify it and give it a name or whatever. For example, this is going to be related with the server notification or whatever we want. Okay, and just modify this information and make it available for the users. So as a business analyst, this is basically my role. Come to the tool and just create requirement, create request, in this case a customer requirement, a high-level requirement. So in the process we have defined, we have got another user which we have called the system engineer. Okay, I'm going to close the project right now, and I'm going to open it again, but using that other role. Instead of business analyst, I'm going to log in as a system engineer. According to the process that we have defined, the system engineer is in charge of entering to the tool, analyzing the high-level requirement, the customer requirement, marketing requirement, basically all the user requirements, and based on that information, he will be creating the low-level requirement, the system requirements. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just logging in as a system engineer, and as you can see, once the screen catch me, as you can see here, we have got a view that is pretty close to the one that the business analyst was using, but contains more information. In this case, I don't have only the user requirements, but I also have got here the system requirements and the system test. Okay, basically what I'm going to do using this role is create a system requirement to fulfill the high-level requirement, the user requirements. Okay, so basically I'm just following the process defined. Once again, it's something that Word or Excel is not going to allow me to do. So for analyzing the high-level requirement, the user requirements, we have created several views for the system engineer. He can analyze, for example, the user requirements using different attributes, views, which reminds us to the Microsoft Excel view. That can be an option. We can also classify the requirement based on different attributes, on different values. For example, in this case, I am just watching the element classified by priority and status. Okay, so this is another way, another mechanism for analyzing the information. We have got the information already in the database, so we can now present it in the way we like, in the way we want. Okay, and another important view, which is going to be really helpful, is the impact analysis view. As you can see here in this view, basically we are displaying all the high-level requirement, all the user requirement, and under each user requirement, we can see if there is any system requirement fulfilling that request. Okay, as you can see, there is a lot of requirements that we haven't fulfilled yet. Those requirements are the ones that I have imported just a moment ago from Excel and from Word, because as we have created those requirements just a moment ago, we haven't created system requirement to fulfill them. And also, I can see here the requirement that they created just some minutes ago, the server notification requirement. So what I can do from here is, for example, create a system requirement to fulfill my user requirement. So I can just select this specific user requirement and create a new element. Now the user, as this user is not the business analyst, will be able to create a different type of element. In this case, a system requirement. This system requirement is going to be automatically related with the user requirements we have created. Okay, take into account that we can create this relationship between the user requirement and the system requirement afterward, but it's also really helpful to create it automatically at the same time that we are creating the system requirement. So I'm going to give it the name my default system requirement or whatever. Click on OK, and I will be creating a new system requirement that, as you can see right now, it's displayed under the user requirement, because basically this requirement is going to fulfill the previous one. Okay, we can also analyze the information the other way around. We can see instead of watching two levels, user requirements, and under the user requirement the system requirement, we can analyze the other way around. See the system requirement, and under each system requirement we can see if there is any user requirement that was the source of or the origin of this system requirement. Okay, so once again, and this is really important, the traceability can be analyzed at element level, not at document level, but for each single element. Once we have created these elements, we can modify them, we can change them. Okay, for example, we can go to the newly created element, the system requirement, and we can just change the priority, the name, whatever we want. Especially helpful is going to be the modification of the status attribute. Okay, so for example, this is the element I have created, and as you can see, it's in the status ready for review. From this status, I can go to the status review, or from this to the status more information needed. I'm going to switch to review status. Once I am in the review status, I can change to the on hold, reject, or approve status. Basically, based on the current status, I will be able to modify the transition to a different status. This is because we have defined, and this is another important difference with Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, we have defined a workflow associated to the status attribute. Okay, I will show you just very quickly. Through this workflow, we can specify which transitions are going to be available from the different status, and even which users are going to be able to perform the transitions. For example, only the business analyst is going to be able to reject this or to approve this. And we can even attach some scripts to the transition so they will be automatically executed. So for example, when we reject a requirement, I'm going to send a notification to the user, letting them know that we have rejected their requirement, for example. Okay. Now that we have created a new system requirement to fulfill the user requirements that we have created a moment ago, we can close the application and log in again as a business analyst to see how the business analyst is going to be able that his request has been processed. Basically, we have created a specific view for the business analyst, and through this view, what we have called traceability view, he will be able to display, he will be able to show all the user requirements that we have got, and under each user requirement, he's going to be able to display the system requirement that we have created for fulfilling that. Basically, this is the same information that we have got in the previous view. But as you can see here, we have got a completed column, and sorry, and this column is displaying a percentage of the status of the requirement. This percentage is automatically calculated for the system requirement because they have got a status. So basically, if the status is approved, it's 100%. If it's pending or it's on hold, it's 0%, and so on and so on. But for displaying the status of the high-level requirement, of the user requirement, what we are doing is just automatically calculate that status because they don't have a status. Okay, so we calculate that status based on the low-level requirement that are traced with it. So if all the low-level requirements are approved, are accepted, then the high-level requirement will be accepted. If at least one is pending or is on hold, it's not going to be 100%, but it's going to be 90, 80, whatever. So we can create one of these charts views in order for the business analyst to analyze that information and to review the status of the project. Okay, so this is just another example of what we can do when analyzing the information. Very quickly, I'm going to go back as a system engineer and just show you another way for working with the traceability. We have seen that we can create the traces upon element creation. We can create the traces also afterwards, just very easily using the different menus and different options. But we can also, through the block diagram that I showed you a moment ago, we can also use this diagram to navigate to the different traces. For example, we have got here a traceability between the system requirements and the system test. We can check this trace and enter into this trace, and we are going to display a traceability matrix involving in rows the system requirements, and in the different columns the system test. So I can create a matrix displaying the traceability between those two blocks, in this case system requirement and system test. Okay. From here I can see what we have been tracing with, we can create new traces, we can modify the existing traces, and we can even apply important filters. So for example, I can say I want to see if at least one of the system requirements we are not testing it. So display those system requirements that are non-related with any test. And automatically I'm watching right now those requirements that I am not testing. Okay, this is really helpful for analyzing the traceability. I can also apply more complex filter. For example, show me those elements that are related with a failed test or with a test that has been passed, things like that. I'm just about to finish, but before finishing I would like to show you that we can also produce reports, and we can also export the information to different formats. We have got what we call the direct exports, which are basically a way for dumping what we have got into the tool into Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel. For example, I'm watching right now this view and I want to select only the, for example, system requirements or only the user requirements, okay, and specifically not all of them, but the customer requirements. So I can analyze here all the customer requirements and automatically, just by clicking in here, generate automatically a Word document that is going to contain all this information. I can select a Microsoft Word dot file, a template file, in order to give it format, or I can just skip that part. And just as simple as that, I can automatically generate a document that I will be able to import, or I will be able to modify outside of the tool, and then import the changes into the tool. As Paul was mentioning, the idea is that you perform the changes into the tool itself. It's going to be more helpful to have this unique source of truth. But there is a mechanism for exporting into Word, into Excel, and just have a document that you can carry on to a meeting or whatever. Okay. For the Excel export, it's exactly the same. You just select an Excel-like view, like this one, for example, and just by clicking in the Excel export, you get what you see is what you get export of the current view. Those are the direct export. And once again, like Paul was mentioning, we can just perform round trips for exporting and importing this information. Finally, we are also able to export this information to actual reports. Okay, we can create more complex reports, not just dump what we are watching into the screen into a document, but create charts, create dashboard, create statistics, metrics with the information that we have got into the project. So, for example, I've got here a couple of simple reports that we can export, that we can generate, and allow me to show them before finishing. We can just go to the report menu and select a report that we want to generate, that we want to create, and the tool is going to automatically create or populate that report with the information that we have got into the tool. Into this report we can create, for example, just a list of the user requirements of my project with these specific attributes, or with this information that I would like to have, whatever. Something as simple as that. Or we can create much more complex reports. Okay. First of all, I'm just showing you this traceability report. It's going to display the trace between some elements. I'm just displaying here user requirements trace with system requirements. Okay. And once we have got that report, we can save it, export it to several external formats, like for example PDF. But we can also create or generate much more complex, much more advanced reports. For example, we have created a test coverage report. Okay, in this report that is being generated right now, we are going to display the user requirements that we have got into the project. Under each user requirement, if any, we are going to display the system requirements that we have got related with that user requirement, if any, once again. And under the system requirement, we are displaying, once again, if any, the system test that is testing that system requirement. Finally, at the right part of the report, you can see that we have got the status of the system test. Okay, so basically we have just choose different status, pass or fail. That information is being gathered from the tool, from visual requirement, but then the report itself is adding some logic, because the report itself is calculating the status of a system requirement based on the status of the test. Basically, we have configured the report for saying if all the system tests associated with this system requirement are passed, the test will be passed. Sorry, the system requirement will be passed. If at least one is failed, the system requirement will be failed. And the same calculation, we are applying that very same calculation to calculating the status of the user requirement based on the status of the system test. And at the end of the report, we have created a chart containing my project status. Basically, I have got 14 pace user requirement and 5 failed user requirements. Okay. So as you can see, we can just proceed or analyze or work with the information in the way we want, not just using the default view or the default or the view that we have used for entering the information. Okay, there is much more information, much more things to do, much more features, but I think that so far this is more than enough for this first contact with the tool itself. Just for finishing, allow me to just recap or summarize what we have seen in this video using this conclusion. Basically, what we have seen is that when working with Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word, the thing that we are missing are that we are lacking of a repeatable process. There is no real process in Word and Excel. There is no central repository. We have got several documents, several emails, several things running through the company, but now we have got a central database with all the information. It's also really easy to perform change management and version control using a tool like this, using visual requirement, because everything is going to be centralized and everything is going to be automatically controlled. We can get project metrics, reporting, dashboard. We can have also several users working with the same elements and so on. Okay, so basically that was all from my side. Paul?
Lovely. Jose, thank you very much. That's excellent demonstration. I noticed now that we've got a couple of questions that have come in. So Jose, I don't know if you can see those questions, but the first one is how does Visual define a test? Is it possible to attach individual unit tests to a requirement? And if so, is it able to track the status of the execution of those tests? The answer to that is yes, but Jose, would you like to expand on that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we have, this is a very good question, because we have skipped the test part. We have mentioned about the test, but we haven't focused too much on them. We can basically define the test as any other element, as any other, for example, the user requirement or the system requirement. We have created this block, and we have stored and we have defined the system test inside here. Basically, we have created a template for the system test, and in this template we have specified the different fields that we are going to have for working with the test. In fact, I have got another role for working with the test. That's
probably enough, actually, because
yeah?
Jose, we're kind of running out of time. I've got one other question that I'd like to answer. I know we're just 2 minutes over, so
okay.
Thank you for sticking with us. But there's one other question which I would like to answer.
Yes.
What options are there for integrating with issue and task management tools like Jira? So in answer to that very quickly, we use an integration partner. We do have the direct integration, real-time integration with Jira. It's a two-way integration. And you as the user define precisely what items and objects you want to share between those two tools. We actually also have a number of integrations with external test tools using our integration partner. So we have various ways of integrating information between tools. But obviously on the testing side, Jose is showing you that within the tool itself, there are some test capture and recording capabilities within the tool. I think really the time is up, unfortunately. Jose, thank you for supporting with the demonstration. I really appreciate that. I apologize. If you've got any other questions, please feel free to come back to us through email. If you go to the last slide, Jose, you can just present this last slide for me, please. And it's got a contact there. But certainly you can make contact with us directly, obviously through our website or directly with me on my email or my mobile number there. And if there's any other questions you want answered, then please feel free to come back to us. We've gone slightly over, but I've got to say huge thank you to all of you for sharing your time with us. I know your time is precious. I hope you found the information of value, and certainly hope that we are able to speak with you or work with you in the future. Jose, again, thank you for the demonstration, and at that I will close the webinar.
Thank you very much, also, Paul.